So let me get this straight. 4 million Italians packed up and left paradise, the land of beautiful landscapes, vineyards, and sunshine, for tenements in New York and factory smog in Chicago? There's got to be more to this story, because this isn't just about migration, it's about geopolitics, poverty, and the birth of a nation. Today we'll explore why on earth would Italians leave beautiful Italy for the US in the late 1800s? What made Italians leave? What they hoped to find in America? How did they get along with Americans? And why so many stayed for good? This is Legal Aliens, where borders meet stories, and where divided people turn despair into destiny. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Ray, and welcome to Legal Aliens. What made Italians leave? To understand the Italian exodus, we need to rewind to the mid-19th century, before Italy as a country was even a thing. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the Congress of Vienna withdrew Europe's political map. In Italy, this meant old monarchies returned and the peninsula fractured into rival regimes. In the Northwest became the Kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia under the House of Savoy. In the Northeast, Lombardy and Venetia fell under Austrian imperial rule. In central Italy, it remained divided among duchies and the Papal States. In the south, Naples and Sicily became the Bourbon-ruled Kingdom of Two Sicilies. It wasn't a nation, it was a geopolitical chessboard for Austria, France, and the papacy. Then came the Risorgimento, the movement for national unification and sovereignty. Like elsewhere in Europe, the revolutions of 1848 and 1849 inspired liberal and nationalist ideas and swept through cities like Milan, Venice, and Sicily, trying to kick out the Austrians. But they failed, crushed by foreign armies and local repression. But that lit a spark. Decades later, that spark became a fire. Count Camillo Benso di Cavour, Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, formed alliances with France under Napoleon III, while Giuseppe Garibaldi rallied volunteers in the south. Their victories led to the proclamation of the Kingdom of Italy in 1861 under Victor Emmanuel II. Venezia joined in 1866, Rome in 1870, completing unification. But unification didn't mean unity. It was like a marriage between rich and poor that looked great on paper, but fought over everything from taxes to language. In the north, especially Lombardy, Piedmont, and Liguria, industry and commerce thrived. Cities like Milan, Turin, and Genoa formed the Il Triangolo Industriale, the industrial triangle, producing textiles, metals, and machinery. By 1871, the North generated nearly 70% of Italia's industrial output, and literacy rates climbed above 60%. Meanwhile, in the South, or Mezzogiorno, feudal land ownership, poverty, and illiteracy persist. Over 60% of farmland was held by less than 5% of landowners. Millions of peasants, the braccianti, worked other people's fields for starvation wages. Literacy was below 20%, and government investment barely existed. The author and historian Professor Matteo Pratelli described the contrast vividly.
Nell'Italia meridionale lo scenario era altrettanto drammatico. La vita dei contadini si caratterizzava per salari da fame, tasse alte, basso prezzo del grano, ricorrenti crisi agricole e viticole, oltre che per la repressione del dissenso socio-politico.
In southern Italy, the situation was equally dire. The life of the peasants was marked by starvation wages, high taxes, low grain prices, recurring agricultural and viticultural crises, and repression of social and political dissent.
Meanwhile, in the industrializing north, nell'Italia settentrionale la fragilità del neonato sistema industriale impedì di assorbire l'eccedenza di manodopera agricola.
In northern Italy, the fragility of the newborn industrial system prevented it from absorbing the surplus of agricultural labor. In short, industry was too weak to hire, and agriculture was too poor to feed. Then, between 1877 and 1878, under Prime Minister De Pretis, Italy imposed tariffs to protect northern factories. They backfired, though, punishing southern exports, widening inequality,
in creating what historians call l'unione senza integrazione, union without integration. Then nature piled on. The phylloxera plague destroyed vineyards in the 1870s. Harvests failed, and bread prices soared. Earthquakes, floods, and finally, the Messina disaster of 1908 killed more than 100,000 and drove many over the edge. As Pretelli notes, chi aveva accumulato più risparmi sceglieva l'America Latina, dove le opportunità erano migliori e l'adattamento alle società locali più semplice. Chi aveva minori possibilità se ne andava negli Stati Uniti, visto che il costo del viaggio era più basso e vi era facilità di accesso al lavoro non qualificati nell'industria.
Those with great savings chose Latin America, where opportunities were better and adaptation easier. Those with fewer means went to the United States, where passage was cheaper and unskilled jobs were easier to find. Between 1840 and 1914, more than 13 million Italians immigrated, roughly 4 million to the United States alone. What were they hoping to achieve? For most Italians, America wasn't solely about luxury. It was about survival, economic advancement, respect, and a chance at self-determination in a rigid class system that had no room for them. In rural Italy, a laborer earned 25 centesimi a day. In America, $1.25, nearly 5 times as much. Those wages fueled something bigger, remittances. Yeah, they were sending money back. By 1913, Italian workers abroad were sending home about 75 million USD, over 2 billion today, nearly 10% of Italians' national income. Money kept families alive and entire villages functioning. And every successful letter home inspired 10 more to leave.
Fratelli explains, tire per gli Stati Uniti erano soprattutto giovani uomini fra i 14 e i 45 anni di origine per lo più meridionale, i quali se ne andavano senza mogli e figli per tentare la fortuna in America.
Those leaving the United States were mostly young men between the ages of 14 and 45 years old, primarily from the South, departing without wives and children to try their luck in America. They called themselves uccelli di passaggio, birds of passage, men who planned to earn, send money home, and return to buy land. But America changed those plans. By 1890, Italians made up 90% of New Yorkers' public work laborers. In Chicago, 99% of street workers were Italian. By 1905, 3 out of 4 worked in manual labor construction, railroads, transport, or factories. In East Boston around 1900, 14% were unskilled, 23% were semi-skilled, and 54% were skilled manual labor, and only 10% in non-manual roles. Life was harsh. Crowded tenements, low pay, constant prejudice. But the promise of stability was stronger than nostalgia. Soon, wives, children, and cousins followed. New York went from just 1,500 Italians in 1860 to over 1 million by 1930. Italy's diaspora became an American story. How did the Italians get along with Americans? Integration was tough, and sometimes violent. In Protestant America, Catholic Italians were treated with suspicion. Their darker complexion, unfamiliar dialects, and communal ways set them apart.
As Fratelli notes, negli Stati Uniti gli immigrati italiani furono spesso identificati come appartenenti a una sorta di razza inferiore. Erano rappresentati come topi che sbarcavano dalla nave per infestare il territorio americano e furono etichettati con termini dispregiativi quali Dago, Wop o Guinea.
In the U.S., Italian immigrants were often portrayed as an inferior race, depicted as rats, disembarking from ships to infest American soil, and branded with slurs like Dago, Wop, or Guinea. In New Orleans, Italian laborers were recruited to replace freed African Americans in the sugarcane fields. Even Mayor Joseph A. Shakespeare complained that the city had attracted the worst classes of Europe, referring to Southern Italians and Sicilians. Then in 1891, 11 Italians were lynched by a mob of thousands after being acquitted of murder, the largest mass lynching in U.S. history. No one was ever charged. Think about that. 11 men murdered in daylight, and the killers walked free. That wasn't justice. It was a message. And yet, Italians endured. They built little Italies in New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, and New Orleans. Little pockets of home. They formed mutual aid societies for the sick and jobless. They established Catholic parishes that doubled as schools and meeting halls. And they kept traditions alive through festivals like San Gennaro and Our Lady of Mount Carmel, blending faith, family, and resilience into America's cultural fabric. By World War I, tens of thousands served in the United States Army, proving loyalty not with words, but with blood. So why did Italians stay? 3 reasons: family, policy, and opportunity. Family. Children were born in America. They spoke English, went to public schools, and pledged allegiance to a new flag. Soon, Italy became the old country, a place of stories, not futures, policy. The 1920s changed everything. The Emergency Quota Act of 1921 and the Immigration Act of 1924 limited arrivals to 3% of their nationality based on the 1910 census. It looked fair, but favored Northern Europeans, who'd been here longer. Southern Europeans and Eastern Europeans, Italians included, saw their numbers slashed by over 80%. The climate of xenophobia was already building, but no such limits applied to Canada, Mexico, and Latin America. But for Italians, the door was closing. Leaving meant never coming back, so families said, meglio restare, better to stay. Opportunity. By 1940, Italian Americans owned over 160,000 small businesses. They rose from ditch diggers to bakers, barbers, grocers, and builders. During World War II, between 750,000 and 1.5 million Americans of Italian descent served, around 10% of all U.S. troops. 14 received the Medal of Honor, and Enrico Fermi helped usher in the atomic age. As Pretelli summarizes, il mito della presunto inassimilabilità degli italo-americani, avallato da molti americani anglosassoni, è stato completamente decostruito nel secondo dopoguerra, quando gli immigrati hanno mostrato la loro capacità di integrarsi rapidamente nel tessuto socio-culturale statunitense. The myth of Italian Americans being unassimilable, long believed by Anglo-Saxons, was completely dismantled after the war, when immigrants proved how quickly they could integrate into American society. After 1945, the GI Bill allowed returning veterans to attend college, accelerating social mobility. What did they contribute? Italian Americans helped build the modern United States. In labor and infrastructure, between 1880 and 1920, Italians represented nearly 40% of all new arrivals in construction trades. They built railroads, tunnels, and skyscrapers that powered American industry. In food and culture, by 1930, they had opened over 10,000 bakeries and restaurants. They gave America pizza, pasta, espresso, and the spirit of La Famiglia. Hector Boiardi became Chef Boyardee. Amedeo Obici founded Planters Peanuts. Giuseppe Di Giorgio built the largest fruit company in the nation. In arts and entertainment, directors like Frank Capra, Francis Ford Coppola, and Martin Scorsese defined American cinema. Singers like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Tony Bennett, and later Lady Gaga shaped its sound. By 1970, nearly 1 in 10 American musicians identified as Italian American. In science and education, physicist Enrico Fermi helped unlock nuclear energy. By 1900, over 65% of Italian Americans worked in white-collar or professional roles, a testament to education as their new inheritance. In leadership and enterprise, Amadeo Giannini founded the Bank of Italy, today's Bank of America, which transformed modern finance. Fiorello LaGuardia led New York through the Great Depression. Geraldine Ferraro became the first female vice presidential nominee, and Nancy Pelosi rose to Speaker of the House. So why on earth did Italians leave beautiful Italy for America? Because beauty isn't always opportunity. Because hunger, taxes, and failed reforms can push even the proudest people to sell into the unknown. And because in the end, they didn't just come to America, they helped build it. I'm Ray, and this is Legal Aliens. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like, subscribe, and share your family's immigration stories in the comments. Grazie mille, e ci vediamo presto. You guys have a great day. I'm out.